Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I am your host, PhotoJoseph. If you're not familiar with me already, I am a photographer, filmmaker, content creator, YouTuber, all that good stuff. PhotoJoseph, absolutely everywhere. Would love to see you on the socials and everywhere else. And today I'm going to be taking you through a couple of different workflows for portrait photography. Before we get too far into this, I want to make sure that you all can see and hear me just fine. So give me a quick little shout out in the chat room. I want to make sure that everybody's seeing and hearing me. And also want to let you know that, so this webinar today is unique. This is a one-off. We're not repeating this one, as goes for the rest of the webinars this month. We are having quite a few of these webinars, a couple a week over the next month, and there's going to be no repeats, which is really awesome. So let's see, everybody's saying that you can see me. Excellent, great, yes, excellent, awesome. Thank you guys very much. As you saw, you do have this chat room here. If throughout the presentation today, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop them into the questions area where you're chatting with me right now. I will not be doing Q&A at the end. I will in fact be doing Q&A throughout. If you haven't attended one of these before, you'll know basically anytime there's a pause, a wait while I'm waiting for something to load, or just any opportunity to, I'll jump over and try and answer your questions. If you don't get a question asked or answered, or you think of a question afterwards, feel free to hit me up on social media. Twitter is definitely the best. Again, at PhotoJoseph on Twitter. You can at me on there, and I will do my best to answer your questions. Let's see, other housekeeping. If because there are so many of these, if you haven't registered for others of these, they are ongoing, as I said, a couple of weeks over the next month or so, and you can get those by going to well, you probably got a email blast about it, but also if you just go to nickcollection.dxo.com, you will see a pop-up there about the webinars where you can register for them. Final bit of housekeeping, I think. This session today is being recorded. You should receive an email 24 hours after this ends with a link to the recording. So if you missed any part of this, or you just want to watch it again, you'll be able to go back and check that out. So with that said, I do believe we're ready to go. One person is saying they don't see anything, everybody else is saying they are. So if you're not seeing anything right now, then check your GoToWebinar panel settings. You can hide the picture of me, you can hide the picture of my screen, but you should be seeing both right now. And we're just gonna get started. So actually, before I even dive into the photo itself, I wanna talk about portrait photography as a whole and my approach to it, if you will. I do a fair amount of portrait photography. These days, I do less commercial work. I don't bring that many people into the studio for portrait photography, for portrait photos, because it's just, I don't know, it's kind of something I'm not super into anymore. I used to do a lot more of it. And these days, more of the portrait work that I do is kind of creative portraiture and street photography, a lot of street photography. I'm not showing you street photography today. Everything today is posed kind of studio, more traditional portraiture, but that's more of what I'm doing these days personally. Now, the first couple of photos that we're going to look at today were shot at we call this a slam. It's a photo slam. It's this local event that I have where I live, where a bunch of photographers and a bunch of models come together for the exclusive purpose of shooting, working together. So the photographers get photos, the models get photos, makeup artists come in, prop designers come in. It's kind of this big community event. It's really, really cool. And out of that, we are able to make some really interesting photos. And so the first two photos I'm using today are from a recent event that was kind of a, what do you call it? Like an apocalyptic, post-apocalypse world kind of a thing. People are wearing kind of funky, cool clothes, and it was an opportunity to do some cool lighting and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to be working with today for the first two photos. Both of them we're going to take different looks, different approaches towards the looks, but they're both going to be kind of a bit edgy, grungier type of looks that I'm going to be going after. And then I'm going to finish with a more traditional portrait. A funny story, when I was looking for photos for this, I wanted just kind of straight studio photography. And usually when a client comes in for a studio portrait, I'm not having them sign a model release because this is for their own use. I don't need the rights to it to use for things like this. And I've just realized the fallacy of that, because I was pulling up portraits. I'm like, oh, I don't have the rights to this. I don't have the release for this. I don't have a release for this. I even emailed a couple of people. They're like, yeah, I'd rather you don't. So, so the one kind of clean, normal portrait that I have in here is a bit more playful. It was someone that I did hire to come in to do a project. So, but they are still, it's kind of a traditional white background type of a photo. And with that one, I'll be taking a much more traditional look. So the photo itself may not be super traditional, but I will be taking a more traditional approach to the treating of it. And also I will be doing a batch processing on it. So we're going to do two that are kind of edgier type photos, and then one we're going to do a more traditional. And I'm going to show you how to do a batch processing on it, because obviously if you're doing a portrait shoot for a client, odds are you're delivering multiple photos, and it's helpful to see how to batch that, because once you design a look for it, you're probably going to want to go about doing them all that way. All right, let me take a quick look at the questions real quick, see if there's anything that I need to address right away, and then we will get going. Edwin saying, excellent tutorial in PhotoLab 2, just caught it a few days ago. Oh, you're good. Excellent, thank you for saying that. All right, we are good to go. So I'm gonna be working in Photoshop primarily today, obviously then jumping into the Nik filters from Photoshop. You can do this from Lightroom Classic. It's a little bit more convoluted to go from Lightroom CC. I've talked about that in previous webinars, and actually there are blog posts at the DxO website. If you go to DxO.com, click on the blog button up at the top there, you'll see some articles that I've done on how to do different workflows from different apps. You can of course also use PhotoLab, which is included in Nik Collection 2, but I'm going to be using Photoshop today. We're starting off with this photo here, which is, you can see, kind of a cool, this is actually natural light. There was light coming through a door behind me, and then there's obviously the window in front of me. So all natural light here, which was kind of a cool, like found this neat light in this warehouse we were shooting in. Quite dark, intentionally shot very dark, but I am going to brighten it up a little bit. This is straight out of camera raw. You see nothing has been done to this photo yet. And honestly, the first thing I do with a photo, whether I'm in Camera Raw or in Lightroom or anywhere else, almost always the first thing I do is I hit the auto button, because I just want to see what the software thinks. And in this case, it's actually pretty good, right? It brightened up the background a bit. The thing was a little bit too underexposed. I shot it a little bit too dark. So we're getting that in there. Let me see, why am I syncing? Let me pause my Dropbox here, make sure that's not interrupting the workflow. It's brightened it up a bit. It could actually be brighter still, especially on her. I like the dark background, but I want her to be a bit brighter. So playing through these, I'm just going to take my white level and bring that up a bit. And you can see that it is bringing the brightest parts up quite nicely. I think I might even bring my blacks down a little bit, just adding a little bit of contrast in there. Looking at the photo overall, it's got great colors. I love the blue in the background. It was, of course, intentionally shot this way. She's looking great, maybe a little on the cool side, so I might be wanting to warm her up a little bit. It's quite low light, so it's a bit high ISO. There's a little bit of noise in there. I'm going to play off of that, probably add a little green to it. There is natural vignetting happening. If you look around the edges of the photo, there's absolutely some lens vignetting happening, and that's just the lens that I was using on this. It is, what's the manufacturer? Anyway, this is shot on a Panasonic S1, but the lens is a third-party lens, all manual, and it does have a little bit of natural vignetting in there, which is great. I actually quite like that, especially for a portrait like this. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do right now. To open this, now obviously you have the open image button down here, and if you're not familiar with Camera Raw, if I click this, it's going to essentially render this, rasterize it, and open it in Photoshop. But if I hold down the Shift key, that button turns into Open Object, and that then opens as a smart object in Photoshop. The advantage of a smart object in Photoshop is twofold. First of all, because it was a raw photo and I brought it into Photoshop and I opened it as a smart object, that means that I can get back to the raw processing at any time. So you'll notice here on the, I forgot to make my mouse bigger. Let me do that real quick in here. But if you look closely at the thumbnail icon on there, you'll see that it has, where is it? You'll see that it has this little kind of a page icon on there that tells me that it is, we gotta make that a little bigger. That tells me that it is a smart object. If I double click on the photo, it will open back into Camera Raw. So now I'm back into the Camera Raw editor, so I can go back to the raw source at any time. That's the first advantage of this. The second advantage of being as a smart object is when I load up my filters, they get applied as smart filters. And just like the smart object, which I can go into and edit at any time, a smart filter I can go in and edit at any time. And this is probably the #1 reason that I would go to Photoshop. If you're an Adobe CC subscriber, you've got Photoshop, you're paying for it, then this is a great reason to use it, because you can go back at any time. I like that flexibility. I like being able to go back and change it. If you're working in, if you flatten out the file, first of all, if it's just a rastered file, then when you apply the filter, you come back, it's permanent, and you can't go back. Even if you look at it and go, oh, I should have made, I don't say, a little bit less vignetting or a little bit more grain or something like that, you can't go back. You have to just undo it and start over again. But as a smart object, therefore a smart filter, you have that ultimate flexibility. So for me, even though I spend most of my time in Lightroom, when I'm doing stuff with the Nik collection, I will almost always go into Photoshop, make sure it's a smart object, and go from there, just because I like that ultimate flexibility. So with all that said, let me jump into, we're going to start with Color Efex Pro. We're going to do our work in here. And we're going to be working with 2 plugins today. Color Efex Pro and Analog Efex Pro. And if we have time at the end, although I doubt we will, I might do a little bit of black and white, but I kind of don't think I'm gonna have time for that. Okay, I'm going to start with presets. So this is, I've given this lecture before, so if you've heard me say this before, then apologize for repeating, but for those of you who haven't, I'm a huge fan of working with presets, not because I don't want to do the work, but because presets give me ideas. First of all, they'll teach me how to use the app. If I'm new to a plugin or an app or tool, presets will help me to learn what's possible within it. But primarily I use them because they're inspirational. I will apply a bunch of different presets to a photo and like, okay, this photo, I kind of know what I want to do with it, but let's just say I really didn't. Going through the presets and trying different presets is a great way to find ideas. So in this case, the presets inside of the plugins here, inside of the Knit collection, are called recipes. So just very quickly, a tour of this app in the event that you're not familiar with it. We have this tool. We have on the left-hand side the filter library. All the different filters that are in here, I can click on any one of these filters and it loads it up on the right. You can see the filter loading on the right over here. Whenever I click on any one of these, it is replacing the filter on the right. So you'll see right now it's Glamour Glow. If I click on Duplex, it's just Duplex over here. If I want to add multiple filters, I have to click down here where it says Add Filter, and that adds an empty filter holder. Now when I add another filter to it, it has now added both. So now I have Duplex and this Film Effect Nostalgia in here. So that's how the system works in here. You have all of them, all the filters listed under all, and then you have these categories that are kind of these are done at the factory. They're basically designed to help you find a filter that might be appropriate for whatever you're working on, whether that's weddings or nature, portrait, whatever. Obviously, it doesn't mean that those are the only ones you can use. It's just kind of a helpful collection, if you will. Underneath the filter library, down at the bottom, you'll see the recipes. When I open that, we see all the presets, and you'll see there's a nice collection of presets in here. I'm going to be working with the En Vogue ones, which are the new presets that come with the current version of the Knit collection, and this is where we're going to start. So again, your filters and your recipes on the left, the filter effect itself is over here on the right. Add a filter to add another one on top of it, and then if you want to save your recipe, click on Save Recipe, and that saves them, so you can go back to it anytime. Let me take a quick look at the question, see if there's anything that's popped up, and ooh, someone says sound keeps breaking away. Oh, that's not good. And I know that I've got nothing going in the background. Actually, I'm going to double check a backup, make sure it's not running. But I did pause it already. Just going to double check that. Yeah, I don't have anything hogging bandwidth, so if there's audio breakups, I do apologize. It is out of my control. Jean-Pierre said you thought it was a webinar of DxO software, not Adobe. It is. The DxO software is the plugins, which we are now in. So hopefully you have stuck around. Dennis asking, will this be recorded? It is being recorded. Other people saying sound is fine, so that's good. You will get a recording of this 24 hours after it ends. So yes, some people are getting sound breaking up. Sorry, there's absolutely nothing that I can do about that, but I'm glad that for some people it's working fine. Perhaps try refreshing your browser, what do you call it, the GoToWebinar app? I don't know, sorry. Okay, so again, presets for inspiration for me are huge. So that's how I'm going to start. I'm just going to start clicking on these different presets over here, and you'll see that these presets, these recipes, if you will, are a collection of filters. On the right, you see this one that I first chose called Blue Monday is comprised of photo stylizer, cross-processing, contrast only. Go to clarity bump, and it's made of tonal contrast and brilliance and warmth and pro contrast and so on. And you get these nice big fat thumbnail views, so you can see, like, I know I don't want to do black and white, so I'm not going to bother clicking on this one, right? And I get these nice big thumbnails to see where it's going to look like before I even click it, which is really great, actually. These nice little thumbnails in there give you a quick idea of what you're going to be working with. So let's see here. I'm going to let's see what I want to do. I think there's one up here called this one here. This is one I'm going to start with called Even on a Cloudy Day. Now this one right off, it's pretty great. This is a really nice effect. I like it. It's maybe a little bit too contrasty, and I think I want to warm her up a little bit. But this is a good start for me. This is what I want to do. So I'm going to come back to it though, because what I also want to do is explore the filters on their own and see what each one of those does. So if you are new to this, now, obviously I'm not new to this, but if you're new to this app, or I keep calling it an app because it really is a miniature app. But anyway, If you're new to the Nik collection, if you're new to this tool, then it can be a good idea to not only go through the presets to find how these different filters work together, but to go through the individual filters and see what each one of them does. Now, obviously, I'm not going to explore every one of these, but I do want to look at individual ones. Now, if you're going to do that, remember that if you've already loaded a preset, you've got a bunch of filters here, and if I click on any one of these, it's just going to replace the last filter. So I do need to go in here and clear this out. So I'm just going to click on the little X on here to get rid of every one of these filters. So now it says empty. There's nothing applied to this yet. It's totally blank. And so I can start going through these. I'm going to go into the portraits and just kind of start looking at what some of these are. Black and white, pretty obvious. Bleach bypass, interesting. Grungy, high contrast, low saturation look. Okay. Classical soft focus, really good for a lot of portrait stuff. Probably not for this one. Contrast only, good to know. If I just need straight contrast, I got a filter for that, and so on and so on. And so things like Film Effects Vintage, this is a fun one. Right, in Film Effects Vintage, you look over here and you've got controls of saturation, warmth, vignetting, and then you have this film type. Now, they're just numbered, so that you don't get a good preview of what they're going to do. There's no name describing them, but as you can see here, as I roll my mouse over it, it updates almost instantly on the screen. And incidentally, this Mac that I'm doing this on is a pretty old computer. It's a 2015, I think, iMac, so this is not latest and greatest technology by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that it's updating this quickly tells me that it's, the software's doing pretty good. This is pretty nice, efficient software in here. So I can go through and try these different film looks in here, and there's a lot of really cool ones in here, so that's good to know. Actually, I quite like that one, number 16. That's kind of neat. So again, see, just inspiration. One of the things I see about this that I go, oh, maybe I like is this kind of reverse vignetting that's happening, whitening around the edges. I said earlier I like the darkening. Maybe I'll go the other way. I don't know. We'll see. Here's two examples that I want to show where you can tell by the name, of course, what it's going to do, but also to point out that a filter will enhance an image. It's not going to completely change it. And if you're trying to completely change the image, you're probably not going to get there. So here's what I mean by that. Let me just turn this guy off. This is a dark image, right? This is a dark, low light image. If I was to apply a high key filter to this, high key means bright, usually a white background, bright light on the subject. It's a very high light content photo. This filter is designed, the high key filter is designed to enhance a photo that's already like that. If I add it to this photo, it's not going to suddenly make it high key. It just makes it ugly. It washes it out and looks kind of ugh. But the flip side of that is the low key. Low key is more like what this is, not low key like in the God of, anyway. I click on low key, and this has now made that dark image even darker and more contrasty, and that works, right? That filter actually works for this photo. So keeping that in mind when you're playing with them, if you have a photo that's kind of dark and you add the high key filter to it, you can't expect that it's just going to suddenly make a white background and make it all bright and high key. It's really designed to enhance what you've got. So you're taking what you have and you're making it better. So just something I wanted to kind of throw out there. Let's see here. There's another one here called Midnight that I kind of like. That's like, okay, that's a bit too dark, but that's kind of a cool look on there. Midnight's neat. In fact, let me just try real quick. See if I brighten this up on here, what would it look like? I might keep this in mind for later because it's kind of a cool effect. It's like a little bit too dark overall, but it's neat. So that's something to keep in mind. There's a contrast filter, skylight filter. Now this one I'm going to point out because I quite like the little bit of extra warmth that it's adding. And remember I said originally that I felt like her skin tones were a little bit cool. So if I toggle this on and off, let's do a before and after on here. You have this compare button at the top, by the way. You press and hold it, and you can see that without it, yeah, there's that overly cool skin tones. Remember, this is the original photo. We have nothing else applied to it yet. I release the mouse to show it with the skylight filter, and it's adding a nice little bit of warmth in there. Okay, well this is good. All right, let's try working with a preset. Let's try actually building one from scratch. I'm checking my notes here. Yeah, we're gonna build one from scratch. Let's try. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes that I made yesterday. Yeah, we're gonna work with the Midnight one. So let's see here. Blurry. It's a little bit too much blur going on. Take the contrast down, take the brightness up a little bit, and let's take our color up a little bit, bring some of that color back. And you have this. Let's see, what do we have in here? Oh, neutral, a color set. And I'm gonna stick with neutral on this. It's a little bit too dark overall. I think I want to add some brightness into this. Let's do that. Let's add some brightness into here. I'm going to go to the all filters in here, and let's see, brilliance and warmth. That might be a good way to start. So I'm going to add another filter in here, add a brilliance and warmth, and this is actually no, that's not the one I want. Let's see here, dark and light and center. Maybe that one will do it. Yeah, let's try that. center luminosity, brighten up the center of that. Ooh, yeah, that works. Okay, that's kind of cool. We're off to something. So the border, the outside is darker. Let's not make it quite that dark. Take the center luminosity up, make that a little brighter. Yeah, we're getting somewhere. I've got the kind of dreamy look to it. Goes along with this. I got the high contrast. I got that color punch. Now, one of the other important things to play with in here is the order of the filters. And I've talked about before, a really good way to see this is to apply a black and white. If you applied a color filter at the top and then a black and white after that, you're going to be making whatever happened before it black and white. But if you reverse the filter, you start with the black and white, and then when you add a color after that, you are adding color on top of the black and white. So it's important to remember the process of the photos goes through, kind of cascades down like gravity through the filters in here. So first midnight's being applied, then darken and lighten center is being applied. Sometimes it's obvious what's going to happen, like the idea of a black and white and then a color filter. It's obvious what's going to happen when you reverse them, but sometimes it's not. So let me just try. I'll just take this dark and light and move it up before midnight and see how much of a difference it makes. And it makes quite a big difference in here. Her skin has gotten way brighter in there. If I try dialing that down, do I like it that way better? And actually, I kind of like the way it was before. So I'm going to go ahead and reorder that again, put that back. But it's always worth playing with these things. Let's try warming up her skin a little bit more. So I'm going to add another filter, go back into portraits, and I'm going to use that skylight filter that I did before. You can see it's added that nice warmth. It's a little bit too, oops, I did not add filter. Let me undo that. Add filter again. There we go. Add the skylight. There it is. So it's added that warmth. If I toggle just that filter on and off, you can see on her skin tones quite clearly. It's adding a nice bit of warmth in there. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of digging it, right? I kind of like this look. Maybe it's a little bit too dark still. Maybe brighten it up just a little bit in there. Brighten up a little bit more in the center. But overall, I think it's pretty good. So you get to a point where you go, yeah, I really, really like this look. And you want to save it. And that's an important part of this workflow, is saving your work, saving your presets. You can come back to it at any time. And that's what the Save Recipe button is down here. So I hit on Save Recipe, and I'll call this, I'll call this Midnight Blue, and save that. And so now it's added this into my own custom presets in here that I worked on earlier. So I can go back and I can go, well, here's one that I created earlier called a film look. There's a hot contrast that I created. There's Midnight Blue I just did, my sepia look, all these different ones that I have saved before. And that's a really big part of the workflow. Incidentally, if you do a preset like this, so let's say I did this and I go, I want to make a change to it. Let's go into Midnight and the Midnight filter, and let's take the blur down a little bit on there. Okay, yeah, that's better. I want to update my preset. When you hover over the preset, you have 3 buttons on here that show up. There's an X to delete it. There's an export button, so you can export your presets, move them to other systems, put them on your website to share them, even sell them if you wanted to. And then there's a refresh down here. If I click on this, it will refresh the recipe, update the recipe with the current settings. So a very important thing to know on there. Another little tip that I want to share with you, I don't think I'm going to do it today, but when you use control points, and we will get into control points later, when you use control points, usually a recipe does not save the control points. But if you hold down the shift button when you click on save recipe, it'll save the control points as part of it. Usually you don't want to do that, but that's a little tip that you can do. Okay, so that's the first photo. All right, let's I'll go ahead and apply this. It is going to apply this, as I said, as a smart filter because it is a smart object, which means that I can go back and edit it at any time. So here's the original photo. There is the filter. In fact, you even get this mask on here. So if I wanted to, I'll grab the brush tool, and let's just say I wanted to mask this out. Let's get a black brush on here. I could take out the filter from a certain part of the image. You can see how it's been masked out there. Usually probably don't want to do that, but in this case, this works out really well. And if I double click on the Efex Pro thing here, it opens back up into the filter, into the plugin, and here I have access to everything that I did before, all able to be continued editing. So there we go. There's my Midnight, Darken, Lighten Center, Skylight filter, and so on. So all those things are added in there. So that's just to reiterate the really great benefit of working with these smart objects. I'm going to take a quick look at the questions here, if there's anything that's come up. If I unlock the arrow, does the preset disappear? Unclick the arrow, does the preset disappear? Unclick the arrow. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Dane. Sorry, if you could clarify your question, I will try to answer it. I'm not quite sure what you mean. Let's see here. Jürgen says, if Mac Updater recognizes an update to the knit collection, how can I install it? Can't find an update button in the preferences. It should automatically run the update for you. Let me just take a quick look. You can always just go to the DxO website, knitcollection.dxo.com, and download a whole new version, a whole new copy of it if you're concerned that you're not getting an update. And and that will just install over what you've got. So you could do that, but yeah, I don't, is there a help? No, not in the help. I'm looking to see if there is an update thing somewhere. I'm not, maybe under settings. No, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a force update. I think it just does it automatically. So yeah, that's what I would do, is go to the website and just download a new version of it. Can you do a side-by-side comparison? Mike Jones is asking. You absolutely can. So up here at the top, so remember I showed you the compare is just this button, but you have two different compare views. You have a split view, which you can move the split point, and you can actually put the split to be a horizontal or vertical. And then again, you can move the split point, or you click on this button and you get a side-by-side, and you can do them side-by-side however you like on there. So there you get your comparison. I tend to, I guess, probably use this the second most, but for the most part, I'm just comparing like this, hold down the button to compare back and forth. But that's me. You absolutely can do this side-by-side. Okay, moving on, we're going to open another file here. Let me close this one out and open another portrait. This is from that same shoot. And this one, quite underexposed. If I hit the auto button on this one, it's really too bright. This is just way too much. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to reset that. And on this one, I think all I really want to do is just brighten it up a little bit. So take up the exposure a little, maybe take up my white points a little bit. And yeah, that's about it. I want this one to be quite dark and grungy in there. I'll once again hold down the Shift key, open object. So this opens up as a smart object, allowing me to go back in and edit that at any time. Incidentally, if you are opening a JPEG or a TIFF file that is not a raw file, you can convert anything to a smart object. If you right click on it, there will be, there it is, convert to smart object. This one already is a smart object. So anyway, you can convert it to a smart object. It doesn't automatically revert it to a raw file, but a smart object outside of the raw bit, any other file that you convert to a smart object, essentially creates a file within a file. That smart object becomes a file inside of this Photoshop file. So you double click on it, it opens up into a new file that you can edit independently. So that's how the smart object thing works. So let's go in, and this time we're going to use Analog Efex Pro. So Analog Efex Pro works very similarly to Color Efex Pro in that you have a series of filters that you can add on top of each other. It tells me here that it's identified as a smart filter, a smart layer, so it's going to be a smart filter. I can add a series of filters on here, or again, I can work with presets. The UI is a little bit different. One of the things I point out is that the Nik collection has been around for a really, really long time. It was only recently acquired by DxO, and the original development of the Nik collection wasn't all at once. One filter came out, and then maybe a year or two later, another one came out, and so on. And so the interface and workflow changed a little bit over time. That's just kind of the way that the filters were developed. So it's just worth pointing out, sometimes things work a little bit differently than you might expect. So here in Analog Efex Pro, I've got, again, presets over here. The presets here are grouped in tool combinations called camera types. So I've got like a classic camera, black and white, wet plate, subtle bokeh. There's the new on Vogue categories. And then the camera kit where we can create our own. But if I start with classic camera and I just click on one of these, you can see exactly what it's going to look like. So this is going to give that really kind of grungy, faded look on here. And a lot of these analog presets are really quite cool looking, if that's the look that you're going after in here. So I'm going to start off with this one here called Classic Camera 9, and then we're going to modify this a little bit. So let's see, let this load up. Okay, looking like this is kind of cool. It's rich. I mean, this one's really, really dark and faded, but it just kind of works for this image. Her face is kind of dirty. The makeup on makes her look like she's kind of exhausted, maybe crying, just like real grungy look for it. It's kind of cool. So it kind of deserves this kind of grungy filter on it. Now, looking at this one, I'm going to go through the different filters that are already applied to it and see what they're doing. And this is part of learning the tool, coming to understand what's in there, but also looking at a preset and going, I really like it, but, right? It's great, but I want to change something. Something's not quite right, something's too much, and so on. And really the best way to do this is start going through them one at a time and seeing what's in here. So like I go to basic adjustments. Okay, so there's this thing called detail extraction that's been turned up. I mean, I can change it. Obviously I can change it and see what happens on there. Well, it kind of brightens it up a little bit. It's interesting. It is pulling more detail. If you look at her shirt down here, especially, we're getting some kind of cool detail pulling into that. All right, good. The brightness. Okay, there's a brightness slider in here. Great. Okay, what else is in here? Dirt and scratches. It's got this dirt and scratches layer on it, and it's cool. But if I try, it's doing things on her face that I really don't like. Look, you see this kind of spot on her arm. I really don't like this. I'm just gonna turn it off. Right now, obviously, I can play with different ones in here. I can see if there's another one that I like better, maybe. But I like that kind of dirty look on the file, but I don't really want this picture to look like the print itself was dragged through the mud. That's just not what I'm going for on here. So I'll just turn it off. Like, I like the overall look, but I don't like that. I want it to be a little bit cleaner. Okay, cool. So we got that on there. Lens vignetting, film type, a great thing to play with and explore in here. Look, there it is. This one, again, like the film preset, the film filter in Efex Pro, there's no naming to these. It's not like, oh, you're loading Agfa 400 whatever film on it. They're just these different presets of warm, cool, subtle films, even black and whites, and they're just numbered, and you just kind of got to click through them and see what the different ones look like and see if there's something that you like better than another one on there. It's just about playing. That's another reason why it's really important to save your presets. If you create something you really, really like, save it, because if you don't, you may never find it again. So actually, let's see, I'm going to try different looks on here. Let's see if I can find one that I like better than the default one. Just playing. I quite like that one there, that number 3. Ooh, which one do I like better? I'm going to go with this one. I like that kind of cool, the cool shadows that are going on in there. Maybe it's a little bit too flat in the background. That's probably coming from the film type. Let me see here. Can I, oh yeah, neutral and faded. This faded slider is all the way up. Let's turn that down a little bit. So there's neutral. It's actually kind of cool too, but I like that kind of faded look, which was just a little bit too much. So there we go. Yeah, I think I like that. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go back to the detail extraction. Play with that a little bit more. See if there's something else I want to do on there. Now I really like, as I drag this up, it's doing some cool stuff to her shirt. I love what it's doing to the shirt, but it's almost a little bit too much on the face, right? If I bring this up, it's just too much on her face. So I want to dial that back. Inside of the knit collection, almost every filter, not everyone, but almost every filter has the control points added to it. Now the control points are one of the kind of hallmark things about the knit collection that make them super, super powerful. And a control point allows you to add or remove an effect from a very precise area. Now, if you've ever done masking before with radial gradient or linear gradient masks, then the idea is that on a radial gradient, for example, I'd click on a spot like her face, create a radial gradient around it, and that would either add or remove, whatever I'm trying to do, the effect from that area. And it's going to be in the shape of a circle or an oval, and it's going to start fully intense in the middle and fade out towards the edge, which sometimes works fine, but sometimes it really doesn't. You have odd shapes. You have something in the middle, like her eyes, for example, you don't want to get affected by it. And so then you have to go in with a brush and you have to be very meticulously mask it out. Control points work very differently. Control points, if you're not familiar with them, are masks, but they're masks that are automatically generated based off of the luminance and the chrominance. That's the brightness values and the color values of the area that you've clicked on. And so when I add a mask to her face, it is going to automatically create the mask only for her face, and it's going to not select things like her eyes and her hair. So here's how it works. I go into control points, and I'm going to add a control point and just click on the center on her face right there. And I haven't adjusted it yet. You see I've got in here detail extraction, brightness, contrast, and saturation on there. And I've already added detail extraction to the whole image. But what I want to do is pull some of that detail extraction away from her face because it's just a bit too much on there. Before I start doing it though, I want to know what I'm actually affecting. So I've added the control point. I haven't changed anything to it yet. I can change the size of it by dragging this guy here. And it is making a circle around it, but that is kind of a primary area of influence, if you will. That's where it's going to be primarily looking for those skin tones because I've clicked on the skin there. But if I really want to see what's happening, next to the control point, you see this little tiny checkbox. I enabled that, and it shows the mask view. And now I can see exactly what's being affected. So if I make this bigger, you see it's going to start getting into her shoulder, a little bit of her shirt. If I bring this down smaller, you can see the area that's being affecting there. And you see that her face, what is being changed on her face, what's being selected on her face really doesn't change much at all as I make this smaller or bigger. I mean, if I go really small, it's going to, but it's being affected inside of that circle there of influence, if you will. But then I can take this control point and I can drag it around, and as I drag it around, you see how it's going to affect. Like if I put it on her hair, it's going to affect the hair and the shadows on there. If I put it on her eye, it's going to select, it's pretty much those darker areas. So it's very, very powerful to be able to do this, enable your mask, and then drag this around and decide exactly where you want this to be affected. You can even add multiple filters to expand on an area. So like if I look at her forehead here, it's for whatever reason, it's kind of not getting all of her forehead. Let's see why is that. It's probably a shiny spot. Yeah, you can see that it's a bit of a shiny spot on there, so it's it probably could do with a little bit more selection in there. So I can add another filter, or I can just hold down the shift key and drag, oops, sorry, no shift key, hold down the option key and drag this, and I've just created a second filter on there, a second control point. And now as I move those around, you can see that I really have done a good job isolating her face on there. So that's pretty powerful. I don't need that for this one, but that's something that you can do. So I'll just delete that. So now that I've got that area selected, I'm going to do a negative detail extraction, which is going to counteract the detail extraction that was done up here. So we're not adding and then taking away. It is doing the math to say, so let's see, this is at 65%. If I take this down to minus, let's say just do the easy math, like minus 32% or so, then it's going to basically make this about 32, 33%. It's just kind of cutting it in half. So that's good to know. So I can decide what I want. So okay, I like that. That's pretty good on there. Let's do a border. Let's do something else on here. Let me add, let's go add another custom effect to it. I'm going to go into classic camera in here, open this up, and then I'm going to go down here to build a camera, and I'm going to start adding my own tools. Now here's a little warning when you're working with this. If I just click on one of these tools right here, it's actually going to replace everything on the right. You can undo it, but this is not where you add onto what you've already got. If you want to add to what you've already got, you need to click on the camera kit, load that up, and that loads up all the different tools in here. And so now I can go in and I can go, let's go for frames, and you see the little plus on here, and I click the plus, and it's going to add the frames on top of everything else that I've already got. So there we go. So this, just a little thing on there, it can be a little bit confusing because you think that you're just adding it there and it suddenly replaces everything. You got to go into the camera kit mode and then click on the little plus to add that filter. So this is where I was saying slightly different workflow in Efex Pro. I clicked on add blank filter in the filter stack over here on the right, and then added one here. You have to click on the plus on the left. So different workflow, different tools. Okay, let's see here. So I'm going to add a frame to this. Let's see if there's anything kind of cool in here. There's this film strip category, which is kind of, let's try a couple of these. That's taking a little while to load. Let me quickly bring up, see if there's any questions in here. Mike Jones asked if you can duplicate control points. You just saw that. Answered your question. Excellent. Oh, Dane says I already answered your question. Good. Why is it always opening in this default filter? I think when you first launch it, it opens into just the kind of the first preset, I'm pretty sure is how it's working. Someone else asking duplicate control points, you saw that already. Can you create custom control points and save them and reuse them? So to reiterate, when you save a preset, a recipe, if you hold down the shift button, it saves the control points with it. There's no UI to this. It doesn't tell you it's doing it. It's like a hidden feature, but that's how you do that. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going through here. I want to add some other frames on here. Let's try and find something else that's kind of a cool frame on here that might look good, because there's something else that I really want to show you that's kind of cool on this. Let me find a frame, good frame for this that I want to get rid of. Some actually the one that was on was pretty good. Let's see how this one looks, and I might go back. Yeah, this one's good. Okay, we're gonna use this one. So I'm looking at this frame, right? I dig the frame, but it's like on her arm right here. I kind of wish that it wasn't on her arm, and maybe I kind of wish it wasn't on her head there. I like it everywhere else, but I don't like it there. But you notice there's no control points here. I don't have control points on the frames. So how am I going to go about doing this? Well, this is another reason to be working with these smart objects and therefore smart filters in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and apply this one. Hit OK. We're going to save this guy. And let's see here, we'll go and let that render out. And then I'm going to duplicate this layer. So we're back in Photoshop, there's a smart object. I'm gonna hit Command J to duplicate that layer. I'm gonna open up the filter again on this top version of it. And I'm going to get rid of the frames in there. So let's do this and let all this load up. See if there's any other questions while that's happening. Kitty Murray, preset suggestions for business headshots when woman has a lot of wrinkles. I'm going to do a more traditional portrait next. Pardon me. Getting rid of wrinkles, probably some negative detail extraction in Efex Pro. We'll come into that. I'll see if I can find a picture I'm using as of a young girl, so she's not going to have any wrinkles, but I'll try and find an example of that. Okay, so this is now loaded back up again. I'm going to turn off the frames. So exact same effect, minus the frames, and hit OK. So now I have two versions of the same photo, one with the frame and one without. You can probably see where this is going. I'm going to mask between the two. I actually want the one with the frames on top. Let me put that one on top. On this top one, I'm going to add a layer mask. This is a Photoshop mask. I'm going to hit the B key to get my brush up. Let's make this a little bit smaller, nice and soft in there. Oh, right, the cursor, okay. The brush looks bigger than it is because I've increased the cursor size. In fact, let me because this makes it really confusing to see what's happening in here. I'm going to turn that off momentarily. Where's that? Accessibility, display, take my cursor size back to normal. So now I actually see the brush size as it's supposed to be. There we go, that's better. So I've got a white mask, I got a black brush selected. I'm going to just kind of brush out between the layers. So you see what's happening is I'm basically brushing a hole through this top photo in here, revealing the photo underneath, whereas the one underneath doesn't have the mask on it. And so this allows me to go in there and kind of get rid of the frame in there. It's a little bit too much. Let me reverse that. Let's brush some of that back in there, put some back in at the top on there. Zoom out of this a little bit, press a little bit of that back in the top on there. There we go. There we go. I just didn't, it's like a little bit too much on her arm in there, but yeah, I dig the way that's looking in there now. So that's a really, really powerful reason to use the smart objects, because you can go in there and say, in an effect that you can't do with control points, either because it just doesn't work for that particular image, or as you saw for this filter, it doesn't even exist, then this is a great way to work around that. So this is a super, super powerful tool for that sort of thing. Being able to duplicate those layers, change the filter in one, and go for it. Same thing could be on her face. Let's say there was some big texture that I applied over the whole thing, but I just don't want it on her face, or I want it less on her face, then this is a great way to go about doing that. Okay, let's do another picture entirely. Let me close this one. And next up, let's see here, we're going to open these photos of Jakari here. I'm going to select all of these at once and open these up into Camera Raw. So this is a nice clean portrait in here. And the reason that I've opened all of these up at once is because when you make a change in Camera Raw, that change, even if you don't open and save the file, the changes that you make are saved into the sidecar, the XMP file. And you can see on here that my highlights and shadows have been adjusted a little bit for this image. In fact, all of these images have a little bit of tweaking. So I've already done that, so I don't have to bore you with it. But I've already done that to kind of normalize these pictures, make them all pretty much the same. So, so that's good, because I'm going to need that done already when I do my batch processing next. Let me go ahead and open up this image. Again, I'm going to open Object here. And this is going to, once again, open as a smart object, so I can add a smart filter. And this is the one that we're going to batch. So here we are, we're back in Photoshop. We are looking at our picture in here. To do batch processing, you have to plan it in advance. I have to know that I'm going to apply a batch filter to this. Now, of course, if you decide later, you just back out and start this process over again. But here's the way you do it. I go up here to the Actions menu, and I'm going to create a new action in here. We're just going to call it Jakari, because that's her name. And I hit record. As soon as you started it, it starts recording it. And now whatever I do at this point is going to be recorded as an action. And then once you've created the action, you can batch apply that action to multiple photos. So it's recording. I'm going to go ahead into the Nik collection. We're going to go into Color Efex Pro 4. And in here, I'm going to do some very simple adjustments in here to give kind of a nice, simple, clean look for it. Let's see here. Let's go for, all right, looking for my notes again. All right, so I'm gonna start with presets. So again, I'm looking at the On Vogue, just trying these, like the clarity bump that really doesn't work for a portrait. Cloudy day one, that's kind of nice in there. Foliage bump's not good. The HDR like, ooh, that's terrible. Bad for skin. Don't do HDR like on skin. Super punch, yeah, like these are a bit too much. These just aren't really, yeah, they really aren't doing it for me. So so let's not do it that way. Let's just kind of do it manually. So let's get rid of all these settings in here. Does someone ask about the wrinkles? Let me see if I was going to do wrinkles in here. Oops, I would go for the filter library. Let me get my cursor back up nice and big again. Now that we're out of the brush. Let's see here. What would I do for that? Detail extractor, can I do negative detail? No, I can't do negative detail. Glamour glow might be a good one to do. It might be too much though. You know what, do me a favor, whoever had asked that, ask me on Twitter later, at PhotoJoseph on Twitter, just to remind me, and so obviously I know how to reach you. And I will spend some more time looking into it, because I don't know offhand. That's not something I normally would do in the Nik plugins. Usually if I'm getting rid of wrinkles, I'll do that in Lightroom or in Photoshop before I go into the plugin. So I can't think of where offhand, but it's a really good question. I would like to get an answer for you. So just at PhotoJoseph me on Twitter, just remind me, hey, how do you get rid of wrinkles using the Nik collection? And I will look into that for you. I wanna move on though with this photo. So I'm going to go back into portraits. Remember I talked about the high key and the low key? This one might work, high key might work on there. Ooh, or not. It's a bit too much on here. Okay, well, you know, it's a start. It's a starting point. So let's see. This has got a bit of glow in there. We got this standard high key and a dynamic high key. If you're ever wondering what one of these sliders is actually doing, like what's the difference between standard and dynamic high key, obviously you can play with it and try and figure it out, but sometimes it's just helpful to look it up. You know, there is a manual, a guide in here, and I just want to show that to you. If you click on the help button in here, it opens up a web page that it's a little, like you look in here, you go, okay, Efex Pro, I open up the filters and it says black and white conversion. It tells you almost nothing, but there's this view page. Click on view page, and now you have a description of every single filter and slider in here. So what was I looking at? High key, and I want to know the difference between standard and dynamic high key. So I'm going to go back into here. I'm just going to hit Command F to find high key. There it is. There's high key, and I can see standard high key adds a high key effect uniformly. Dynamic high key adds a unique high key effect that changes based on the color and tonality of the original object. This control lightens darker objects more than light objects. Great. Okay, so now I can understand it. Just showing this to you because it's pretty common to be running into one of these filters and you're going, okay, the name doesn't really tell me exactly what it's doing. I'm not quite figuring it out, maybe because that slider isn't really designed for that type of image. So clicking on the help, opening up that filter page and just searching in there, super, super handy. I've been using these filters for years and I still go in there sometimes because I'm like, what is this really supposed to do? And sometimes you go like that one there, you go, oh, okay, it's not doing anything for this image because it really isn't designed for this type of image. So there you go. Just a little thing to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to dial this down a little bit. I lost some color. Let's bring some color saturation back. I want to see if I can make this work. Actually, that is kind of working a little bit. Oh yeah, get that high key look a little bit. So if I toggle this off, yeah, that's kind of nice. It's got that kind of bright poppiness to it. Maybe it's needing a little bit more saturation in there. Let's bring that up a little bit. Let's see here. Let's try standard up a little bit more. Let's try the dynamic up a little bit higher. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool in the dynamic. It definitely gets too high pretty quickly in there. So back that off a little bit. Don't want to bring my black points up. Oh, okay, so the black point is crushing the blacks a little bit. Interesting, so it's giving me some of that contrast back in there that I want. Nice, okay, looking pretty good. Maybe the overall contrast could dial down a little bit in there. Okay, we're getting somewhere. I kind of like it. Okay, so now, all right, that's pretty good. Let's try adding some softening to her skin. Let's add a filter on here, and let's see here. There's one in here. Dynamic skin softener is what I'm looking for. There we go. And this one might help with the wrinkles as well. So this is one, actually, this might be the wrinkle one that we're looking for. You can see it's overall softened her skin, but here's the key on this one. You have to select her skin color. Right now it's based off of a kind of random skin color, but it doesn't really match her skin color. If I grab the eyedropper and I click on her face in there, now it is thinking, and it is, there we go, good. It has selected, you see the colors change quite a bit in there of what it selected. It has selected her skin tone, so it is now softening based off of that. So that actually might be the answer for the wrinkles, to be using this one in here, the dynamic skin softener. So that's looking pretty good. Color reach on here is the radius outside of the color that you sampled. So if you have someone with really varying skin tones, kind of splotchy skin, for example, then you might need to bring the color reach up pretty far. If they're quite uniform in skin tone, you could probably leave it down quite low. And you want to leave it as low as possible, because you get it too high, it's going to start expanding out into everything. And you can see here how it's kind of softened her hair and all this other stuff that doesn't really look right, because I've gone too far beyond the original color source. Let's try it like about right there. That's pretty good. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to, that's actually, I'll add a little film grain to this. Let's add filter. And then I'm going to want to fix the white background because it's not white anymore. Let's see, add a little film grain. I like adding film grain to my pictures. Let's zoom into 100% on this. A little bit too much on there to start, so let's dial this back. Now, a little counterintuitive on the film grain per pixel up here, if I take it down, it actually adds more grain because we're adding fewer grain per pixel. The idea is that the fewer grain per pixel you have, the more visible they are. You take it all the way up to 500 and it is effectively no grain at all. So I just want to add a little bit. So I want to add a little bit of grain to this photo in here, just add a little bit of texture to it. I think that works. Okay, good. All right, that's good. And now the white, and now I need to fix the white background. So this is supposed to be a white background. Because of the color effects that I've added in here, it has added this bit of a pinkish tone to the background there, which is not good. So I'm going to add another filter, and there's this one in here called White Neutralizer. So we find this down here, probably under W for white. There it is, the very end. Add that one in here. And I sample the color that I want to neutralize. So I grab the eyedropper and click on the background in there. And the background will, There we go, goes quite neutral. But I don't like the effect that it's having on her face. So this is another great use of the control points. I'm going to grab a control point, click on the background in there, and only affect the background. And let's take a look at the mask in here, what we're affecting. Here we go. We only want to affect the background. Now that's in one, I put it up in the corner here so that it can kind of radiate out from that corner. I'm going to option drag this to do another one on the other side, but we can see that it has affected her face a little bit more than I really want it to. So I'm going to grab a negative control point, click on her face in there, and that is now going to block out her face, keep that from being hit. And we can see that it is still getting on her hair a bit. So I'm just going to option drag this around a little bit and create a couple of these just to really kind of isolate out her. And I don't have to get perfect on it, but I want to block that out pretty well. There we go. I think that works pretty well. Let's make another positive one up here. I could even like go crazy and start adding them all over the place. So this is definitely getting a bit overkill. Let's get rid of that one. We'll get rid of these here. But now with these three at the top that are affecting really just the background, all the ones on her face that are blocking her out, we can even another one on the forehead in there. We've done a pretty good job of isolating that out. Clearly there's more I could do, but I probably don't need to. And this is one of those things, don't go crazy trying to isolate a mask perfectly. You probably don't need to. Before you go crazy on it, back up and look at the effect that's being applied and see if it's even worth doing. So you see I've created a whole bunch of control points in here. Let's hide all the masks on these. And now that that whitening of the background there is bring the intensity up a little bit, neutralize whites, bring that up a little bit. And now as I toggle that on and off, we can see it's subtle, but it is bringing that background back towards that neutral white, getting rid of that color cast to it. Okay, so this is great. I like this. I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK on this, and it's gonna save this out. And remember, we're planning on batching this. The whole point here is we're recording this so that we can run a batch process on it later. All right, so there's the effect that it has applied to this image. I'm going to stop recording right now. And you see on here, all it shows in here is the color effects. If I open this, it doesn't show me anything inside of it. It's kind of a hidden, invisible, it's all within there, but that color effect has been applied on there. So now I will, let's see here. I don't remember which one this was. I'm just gonna close this. I'm not even gonna save this one. I'm going to just batch all of the photos in that collection. So I go over here to automate and choose batch. And the default actions, Jacari's already selected that action. The source is going to be, there we go, Jacari, there's the source. And destination, we'll put a destination folder for this as well. Let's back up a level here and we'll call this Jacari done. That's gonna be the destination and hit OK. And there we go. So now this is going to, because I did not include the camera raw as part of the batch processing, it is going to open each image up in camera raw. So I could make tweaks on here if I needed to, but remember I had already done all this before. I'm going to go ahead and open this as an object. And it is then going to, you can see down in the bottom left corner, it's applying the filter. You see all the preparing images. It doesn't actually open the filter. We don't see it. It's just applying everything. And we're going to get this, this effect applied to it. So this is going to just happen over and over again. And we're going to have to manually, because of the way I set it up, I'm going to have to manually open each raw image. If I did this to a Photoshop files or TIFF files, whatever, that were already through the camera raw process, then I wouldn't have to have that raw interface come up. So there we go. It's asking to save. I hit save, and away we go. Oh, TIFF, choose the compression away. So it's going to reapply this each time to that. It's going to just keep going through there. I will let it process these and see if there's any other questions, and that is wrapping it up for me. Katie Murray, oh good, that was the question about the wrinkle. So I think Katie, we've got your question answered there. Mike Jones, why not select the whole frame and transform the size, scale the size? Oh, okay, you're talking back for when I added the frame. That would have been one way to do it as well. I liked the thick borders. I think he's talking about when I did the masking on the borders in there. I liked those thick borders around the rest of the image. Plus, I wanted to show you that process. So it's another reason to do that. How much, Johnny says, how much does smart filters add to the file size? I don't know. Actually, the smart filter shouldn't add anything to the file size because it's just metadata. The fact that you're retaining the raw file is probably going to make it a bigger file. Actually, it might not, because often when you open a raw file and save it as, especially as a 16-bit TIFF, those often get bigger. So it might actually be more size effective. Interesting question though. I don't actually know, but I think the actual adding of the smart filter, I don't think changes the size. I think the fact that it's a smart object to begin with is more likely to be the reason that it's changing the size. Can you open from Lightroom to Photoshop as a smart object? From Lightroom Classic, you can. From Lightroom CC, you cannot. I actually had a meeting with Adobe a couple weeks ago, and I expressed my begging, pleading for that. I really, really want that feature in there. If you are using Lightroom CC, it's actually not even called CC, it's just called Lightroom, but if you're using the new cloud-based one, then you have to export the raw file, open it through Camera Raw as a smart object, and then save that and import it back into Lightroom. It sucks. The workflow sucks, but it'll get fixed. It's just the way it is now, unfortunately. Okay, moving on. Mike Jones, okay, that's cool. Photoshop saves the steps in any knit collection as an action. Correct. Oh, look, somebody's already telling me to use dynamic skin softener. Some of you guys already know the tools. See, it's so funny. It's funny. I had the skin smoother. Well, a bunch of people saying skin softener, skin smoother. Apparently you do that more than I do. So obviously, as you can see, it's not something I normally do, but I'd forgotten that I actually wrote it into my plan for today. Let's see here. For workflow, this is David. For workflow, do you recommend doing Photoshop adjustment layers, healing brush cloning, etc., before applying Nik filters or after? Great question. Almost always I would do it before, because if I do, especially retouching, healing, stuff like that, if I do that afterwards, it could be changing the grain pattern. It could be changing a texture overlay. I generally want those to be all done before I go in. Mike Jones, option drag, duplicate the control point. Correct. Option drag duplicates the control points. And that was the last question in there. All right, if you got any other questions, fire them up now. Otherwise, we are about to wrap up. Let's see here. That has now finished. So now I can go in and I can open those files. Now these were opened as TIFFs. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake. Yeah, opening as TIFF is just fine. We still have the layered TIFF files, do have layers in them. And if I open up the the Color Efex Pro in here, then we can see exactly what was applied and make any changes that we might need in there. So all the control points are still in here. So if any of those control points need to be moved, which they might need to be moved because she's changing position, you could do that at this point. But we now have done a lot of that. A lot of that work is a batch for us. So there you go. So that's how you go about batch processing these things using Photoshop. And now I have this whole collection of photos, Jakari done, that are, oops, Jakari done. Hello. Open. There it is. That have that filter effect already applied to them. It's not going to draw a thumbnail for me, is it? Naughty software. Anything else in here? How do I get back to rewatch classes you've done last week? So DxO, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing with the old ones. I will tell you this though. So I mentioned in the beginning that if you go to the DxO website, there's a blog button. I've written a ton of articles on there. I'm writing a whole new batch, and I'm writing a batch based off of these webinars. So they're going to expand on, I would say it's kind of half covered the same thing I did in the webinar and half something else. It's kind of a little bit of a mix. But on those, I have asked DxO, and I don't know if they're going to do it or not, I have asked them to embed the video from this webinar. So the one that I did earlier this week, pardon me, the one that I did earlier this week, I've already written an article for that. It's actually a two-parter, and I have asked them to embed that with it. So I don't think that's going to get published until later, like the end of this month, but that's what I'm hoping. They may also just re-upload them all to their YouTube channel, so you can watch their YouTube channel for that. Mike says, brilliant job. Why, thank you very much. And some people lost sound. Mary Miller, you're asking if you missed my answer. You're gonna have to tell me what the question was. I do not remember. Kitty Murray, thank you, really helpful. New details, I signed up for all of these. Awesome, teaching photography so helpful. I'm glad you enjoyed that. All right, Mary Miller, get your question in there real quick, and I will try and answer it for you. Otherwise, folks, we are all set today. So again, you should be getting an email in 24 hours with a link to today's recording. So if you missed part of it, you'll get that, and that's that. Mary, get your question in there quick. I'm scrolling back trying to find your question, but I'm just gonna let you re-ask it. The link to my last recording was broken. Diana is saying. The one that I did on Tuesday? I know that it's there because I looked at it. Let me go to webinar interface real quick. I saw it myself. So let me just sign in here real quick. Let me do it real quick. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment here while I log in. If it signs in, there it goes. And I'm going to double check it, but I'm quite sure I looked at the last video and it was there. Okay, I can open this up again. Start showing the screen again. If I look at the video library, this is the one I'm in right now. Simulated silver halide, is that the one you're looking for? It's here. Yeah, it's there. So if you got a link, so the link that you would have gotten was automated. I don't know. Did anybody else? Is anybody else here? See earlier one of the week, and did you get an email? And does it work for you? So let's get that out there. Let's see if we can get that question answered. Back to the bottom. Diana Coleman says, PM the DxO email. The DxO email with a link did not work. Huh. Well, that is not good. You know, I should start doing is registering for these myself so I get those automated emails. I don't know how to fix that. Yeah, I don't know how to fix that because this whole GoToWebinar thing is out of my control. I guess all I can really say is because the video does exist, I will encourage the folks at DxO to upload these to their YouTube channel. So keep an eye on their YouTube channel. That's about the best I can tell you. Sorry, I don't know. To the DxO site for videos, YouTube, youtube.com, DxO, let's see here, YouTube, I think it's just DxO. Yeah, here we go, the DxO channel. Go here and let's see if they've uploaded any of the old ones. The DxO webinar, yeah, so they've added some of the other webinars. Yep, they've added some of the other ones already. Yeah, that's from a week ago, a couple weeks ago. So yeah, they're getting uploaded in there. I do know a lot of people at DxO are on vacation right now, so it might be a little bit slower. It's a French company, and like France kind of shuts down during August. So I know a lot of them are on vacation. So a little bit of patience might be needed, but that's where you'll find it. Okay, that is that, folks. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed and learned a thing or two. And again, I encourage you to sign up for some more of these. We're doing a whole bunch more over the course of this month. Check out the DxO YouTube channel. Check out my YouTube channel, PhotoJoseph. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere else. PhotoJoseph absolutely everywhere. If you have any questions that you didn't get answered or you think of later, then you can hit me up on Twitter and I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, that's it. Take care, everybody. See you next time.